nothing about us without us. This means that decisions about a disabled person's life should be made by them, not for them.
We know that we have individual learning needs and we need access and support to participate in the curriculum.
And it's the right for children, for people with Down syndrome, to be welcomed, to feel welcomed into families, into our communities.
Inclusive employment is not just possible, it's actually powerful.
We need a system that puts you and your rights at the centre, that makes it clear and easy for you to get the right support at the right time to live the full life you want to.
Kia ora and welcome. I am Andrew Oswin. I am a former Stripe member, now a Step Up member, and I am the New Zealand rep for DSI Ambassadors. I live in Christchurch.
Welcome. I'm Rosa Waters. I'm a Strive member and I live in Christchurch. Over to you, Sandra.
Kia ora, I'm Sandra Vaccarino, the National Executive Officer of the New Zealand Down Syndrome Association.
I would like to ask Vincenzo Vaccarino, a Strive member, to say the karakia.
E te atua, aloha mai, e te atua, manaki mai, e te atua, awhena mai, ake tolu I amani.
We would like to play a recording by John Atwell.
Thank you, Taryn. Isn't that great? Hopefully everyone's learned the sign. Just a quick overview of the program tonight. We're delighted to have all our esteemed speakers who are here, who are leaders in the field. We do have an action-packed evening, and we'll start with 3 key messages, followed by panel discussions. The panel of experts will explore ways to improve support services across a range of key themes, and these discussions will focus on ensuring rights and improving support services in the context of research, equity and accessibility, well-being, education, employment, and health.
We are honoured to start our evening with a video message from the New Zealand Down Syndrome Association patron, Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Dame Cindy Caro, Governor-General of New Zealand, who extends her greetings to everyone and sends her best wishes for the Well Down Syndrome Day celebrations.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm delighted to be able to share this message in support of 2025 World Down Syndrome Day. Today, we celebrate the lives and achievements of those living with Down syndrome and do all we can to promote their full inclusion across our society. In November last year, I had the pleasure of hosting the National Down Syndrome Awards at Government House, Wellington. I was deeply moved by each of the recipients acknowledged that day for their commitment to doing what they love, to making their communities better, and to inspiring others through their example. Their achievements, and the lives and achievements of so many living with Down syndrome, bring to mind the words of Lao Tzu, "From caring comes courage." I'm pleased to note the emphasis for this big connect on ensuring the involvement of those with Down syndrome in decision-making processes and improving support systems for all those living with Down syndrome and their whānau. As proud patron of the New Zealand Down Syndrome Association, I wish you every success in these important lines of work. And as Governor-General, on behalf of all New Zealanders, I extend my very best wishes this World Down Syndrome Day. Kia ora, kia kaha, huihu mai tātou I tēnei rā.
I would like to introduce Bridget Senton, President of Down Syndrome International and the life member of the NCGSA, to provide a credible perspective on the World Down Syndrome Day theme, improving support services.
Thank you, Rochelle. It's really great to be here. I've also got to say I've got Alex in my office with me as well. And so, yeah, it's good to have Alex in my room too. So it's no coincidence that the theme for World Down Syndrome Day is to improve our support systems. It is a global issue, and many families and people with Down syndrome have no government support. Some countries, like here in New Zealand, have support that is inadequate, and to meet the needs that will ensure the full inclusion of people with Down syndrome. And I'm in particular, when I say that, I'm thinking, the families waiting for early intervention, for example, kids going to the local school, for example. Those are the sorts of supports that government have a responsibility to enact fairly easily, to at least invest in. Down Syndrome International knows and understands that it is essential for the well-being, dignity and the rights of people with disabilities, whether it's a child or a young adult navigating independence or a family providing care. Support is a foundation that enables individuals to thrive. And not all families come from big families, and not all families of children with Down syndrome can make the assumption that their families are going to be there to support them, because they're not. They're often not. We know that families play a fundamental role in caring for children with disabilities, advocating for their rights and helping them build independent lives within their communities. It is families that create a vision for their child with Down syndrome. However, this responsibility often extends throughout their lifetime. Families often step in where formal support systems are lacking, driven by cultural values and necessities. We know families also need support, as they are often the first and strongest advocates for their loved ones. And we know support is different for everyone. Everyone has different needs, and they deserve to be met in a way that respects their dignity, independence, and choice. And certainly for Alex, it's about the sort of support that he receives has to be in his control. What happens when families don't have the support they need? The impact can be significant for everyone involved. We have to always remember children become adults, and with a lack of proper support, it can lead to overprotection, loss of independence, poverty, isolation, and abuse and neglect. And we have to remember that support isn't a privilege. It's a human right. For people with Down syndrome and other disabilities, access to adequate support determines whether they can exercise fundamental rights, such as making important life decisions like managing their own money, access to justice, reporting a crime or serving as a witness, living independently and being part of the community, getting an education and learning alongside their peers, receiving quality health care, work and contribute in meaningful jobs, vote, participate in politics and have their voices heard, and where they can take part in culture, leisure and sports. I'd say all of those things are just living a good life, nothing exceptional. And unfortunately, it is they're all Convention of the Rights of Disabled People. Not unfortunately, but they are. I think what I'm trying to get the message here is that basic human rights are not accorded to disabled people in the same way as they are to others. Sport is what makes other rights possible. It allows people with Down syndrome to live, grow, and fully participate in society, just like everyone else. Yet across the world, many people with Down syndrome and disabilities do not receive the support they need. This is why we are calling on governments and decision makers to improve our support systems. Everyone needs support at some point in their lives. But for people with disabilities, having the right support makes all the difference between exclusion and inclusion, dependence and independence, vulnerability and empowerment. Let's work together to ensure that families and individuals receive the support they need, not as an afterthought, but as a fundamental right. One of the things that I think has been really, really important for myself personally and for many other families was about having a vision so that I knew that the support that I was seeking was meaningful support, that it wasn't, and that without that vision, it could have been anything, any type of support, and I probably would have taken it. In order to get the support that we needed to have a vision for an ordinary life. And often people have said to me, happiness is a vision. Well, it's not a vision. Happiness comes from relationships, belonging, learning, utilising your gifts and talents. It comes from contribution, getting up every day with something to do that's meaningful. It comes from having valued roles, a place in community, learning, working and playing alongside neighbours and friends. So government isn't going to give you any of that. And I suppose that's, although the government and the support that we're all requiring, it's still up to you as a parent and your allies to, I suppose as a parent, to hold on to the vision that you have for your child. And I certainly have always, held a very strong vision for Alex. So, don't wait for government to give you that vision.
Thank you, Bridget. I would now like to introduce Prudence Walker, Disability Rights Commissioner from the Human Rights Commission, who will provide a New Zealand perspective on human rights and improving support services.
Inga mana, inga iwi, sa inga reo, rau rangatira mā, tēnei te mihi ki a koutou. E whānau mai ahau ki Papaioia, ki Otutahi noho ana, ko kaihautu te kahauatanga mō te kāhui tikatangata ki Aotearoa ahau, ko Prudence Walker ahau. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Prudence and I'm the Disability Rights Commissioner at Te Kāhui Tikatangata, the Human Rights Commission, as Andrew has said. And I was born in Palmerston North and now I live in Christchurch. I'm really happy to join you here tonight to celebrate people with Down syndrome and the wonderful contributions you and your whānau make in our community. And the last time I was with you was at the awards at Government House. So it's really great to be able to join these events. I want to acknowledge the great work that NZDSA does, including all the behind the scenes organising to make this exciting event happen tonight. And what a great lineup of speakers there is. I'm really looking forward to listening to them all. So part of my job is to help make sure you and other disabled people know about your rights. And another part of my job is to check if the government is doing all that it should be to protect your rights. Rights like being treated fairly and equally like anyone else in the same community. But being treated as an equal doesn't mean that everybody should be treated the same. It means making sure we do things in different ways that suit different people and that we make sure everyone can join in. We all just want to get on with our lives, studying, working, helping out in the community, doing fun things that we like. The government has signed the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and that means that they have said that they will protect your rights to participate in all of those things. And it means the government needs to work to keep making things better for disabled people and the people who care about you and support you. I've been hearing that many people don't feel like things are getting better. People feel they've lost some choice and control when changes were made to funding last year. And people still have to fight to get the right support at school. And too many people are bullied or treated unkindly and not able to participate in school social activities. More people are looking for work, so it's really hard for disabled people to get a job or get support to help find a job. And many people say that they don't have enough money for important things like going to the doctor and not enough to be able to participate in the community and do the things that you want to do. So there are lots of things that need to change so that you can enjoy your rights. We need government to make your rights the foundation for building the laws and policies and making funding decisions for anything about disability. A system built on your rights sounds a lot like what many of you already know about, which is enabling good lives. So all of our systems and services should be accessible for you and easy to participate in. And the people running those systems also need to make adjustments when you need them so that you can participate. You and your family need to have information and support right from the start of your life so that families, playgroups, early childhood, education and health services can all be inclusive and helpful and give you the best opportunities. And that support should continue and flow easily through all parts of your life when you go to school, to further study, to work or helping in the community or volunteering. The government should fund assistive devices and technology that helps you access information and to participate and be involved in the decisions that are about your life and that affect you. Support systems need to value the people that give support, your family or friends or support workers. They play an important role in making sure your rights are respected and that you keep connected with communities. And we need to support people with enough money to live on for a good life. And that means the costs that disabled people face because our world is not inclusive. We need a system that puts you and your rights at the centre, that makes it clear and easy for you to get the right support at the right time to live the full life you want to. I can't make all of those things happen on my own, but when we work together with a clear message about our rights, we will succeed. Thank you, Andrew.
Kia ora. Thank you, Prudence, and for all your advocacy work to see that rights are upheld. I'd now like to introduce you to our first panel. There'll be 3 speakers who will explore improving support services in the context of rights and research. I welcome our first speaker, Andrew Oswin, to share his thoughts.
We believe that people with Down syndrome should be researchers, not just participants. We have the right to be involved in research as co-designers and to make our own decisions. I am proud to be a co-author of published research.
Thank you, Andrew. I would like to introduce Associate Professor Peter Fitch, Director of the Donald Beasley Institute, to speak.
Thanks, Rochelle, for that introduction. Tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you tonight. And thank you, Andrew. I absolutely agree with you that people with Down syndrome make fantastic researchers. So I am a researcher, so I'm going to try and research can sometimes be a little bit complicated, but I'm going to try and say things as plainly as possible tonight. But when I was getting ready to come along here and to talk about research and the importance of research, I started thinking about this thing called evidence-based policy. And policy is what says the sorts of supports and services that people might need. But when it's evidence-based, policy is based on research knowledge. It's based on what disabled people have had to say about their lives to researchers and others. And it's different from policies that are influenced by just someone's opinion, what they think, or about politics and political considerations. So when we don't use information and evidence generated through research, and it might be research that's numbers-based, or it could be research that is based on talking to people, which is the kind of research I love, we don't make progress. We don't make the sort of progress and changes in people's lives that Bridget and Prudence have just been talking about. So I've been doing research for a very long time, and I think that Aotearoa New Zealand has a really rich history. We've been really good at doing research for a long time, but we've also been really good at ignoring research. And so if I think about some of the big things we've ignored, we have had a lot of research for a really long time that has told us that when we don't support family and whānau adequately, properly, it makes it much more likely that people, disabled people, might end up in institutional care. And we had a Royal Commission of Inquiry in 2024, and that told us that again. But also in 2024, we had a government policy that was implemented that cut support to disabled people and their families. And so that's an example of us not using the research when we're making policy. We've also got a lot of research that's told us that not everyone is treated equally before the law, something Prudence mentioned as well. And when a person with a learning disability is a victim of crime, sometimes other people make decisions about whether their case will proceed, whether they can give good evidence. And we have this thing called Article 12 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which would help us to address that problem, to stop that problem, because it says that all people can make decisions before the law, and they should have access to supported decision-making to help them in those situations. But we haven't really made a lot of progress towards putting that in place. Research has also told us that people with learning disability and other disabled communities experience a lot of health problems, and my fellow panellist is going to talk about that in a minute. Again, we've had a lot of evidence that could have fixed that problem or help us to work towards that problem sooner. And we know that people with Down syndrome have increased wellbeing and happier lives if they have choice and control, and are able to use their funding flexibly. But despite that, we've also had recent policies that have limited that choice and control. So we know these are just a few examples, and that there are many, many more. But when we don't use research to create disability responsive policy, it's really hard to achieve the good lives that we all want for ourselves and for our loved ones. So as someone committed to evidence-based activism, today on World Down Syndrome Day, I call on all governments to improve our support systems through evidence-based policies informed by disabled-led, as Andrew's just talked about, and inclusive disability research. So thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Our next speaker is Charlotte Turner, advocate, INC New Zealand.
Thanks, Andrew. I love your outfit. It is really, putting it up a notch here tonight. I feel a little bit underdressed. So I'm just going to talk to you quickly about two research projects we've done at IHC, one which is published and one which isn't published yet. A lot of the things that we found in our research were quite sad, because we all know a lot of people aren't living the life that they should be when they have Down syndrome or intellectual disability. And I just want to say, just because some of this is depressing, it doesn't mean that everybody with Down syndrome lives a bad life or anything like that. In the data, we can always see people who are living really good lives, which is really great, because it means that hopefully one day everyone will be like that. So we've got two research reports, one which is called From Data to Dignity, and it came out in 2023, and one which is called The Price of Exclusion, which is coming out probably in the next month. So how we did these research reports was we looked in a really, really big, like a research database that has everyone in New Zealand in it, called the Integrated Data Infrastructure. There's 9 million people in there and all of their information. We're all in there. And we found all the people with intellectual disability. We also found all the people that had Down syndrome. Not all of them actually. We found about 5,500. And something that was really interesting actually was that a lot of people have a diagnosis of Down syndrome recorded without having a diagnosis of intellectual disability. So that was an interesting thing we saw in the data. And so we had a look at life expectancy, because we think that life expectancy, which is how long you're expected to live for, is a really important thing. And we saw that people with intellectual disability were not living as long as everyone else, especially if they were Māori. And so we brought this to the government's attention to let them know, because we think it's really important. We know worldwide that this happens, but we then had some really good data to show that it's a really big problem in New Zealand. We found that intellectually disabled people were more likely to have most major diseases, more likely to go to hospital to have injuries treated, more likely to go to the emergency department, and way more likely to go to the hospital for something that could have been avoided, which is really something we should be keeping an eye on. And we found that people with intellectual disability had really high health costs. We found that lots of people with intellectual disability and people with Down syndrome had a lot more mental health problems. They were 16 times, which is a lot, more likely to be treated with psychotic medication, which is something that people get treated with often to make them tired. Over 3 times more likely to have been treated for dementia, and that people with intellectual disability and people with Down syndrome get dementia earlier, which is something that's really important, because a lot of medical people aren't aware of that. And we found that over 2 times more likely to have been treated for any type of mental health condition. So it seemed like there are a lot of physical health outcomes and mental health outcomes that weren't great. And I think especially if you think about mental health, when people talk about mental health in New Zealand, they often don't talk about the mental health of people with Down syndrome, but we think that this is really strong evidence that they should be. And then so we wrote that report in 2023, and we're updating that report this year, and we'll have new data in it from the last census and the last disability survey. And then we have also had a look at some other data about how families are going. We had a look at poverty. So we found that for people with an intellectual disability or Down syndrome, they were twice as likely to live in hardship, which means that it's very hard for them to afford the things they need in life. So almost 20% of them were living in hardship, compared to in the rest of the population, only about 8%. And then there's something called severe hardship, which means you're really, really doing it tough. And we found the same. It was almost double for people with intellectual disability and Down syndrome compared to the rest of the population. And we found that often people get out of hardship, they get less poor as they get older. But we found for the intellectually disabled and Down syndrome population, that's not the same. So we think this is a really strong indicator that the government should be looking more at people with ID and people with Down syndrome and making sure that they're okay. We had a look at children, and we found that children with ID and Down syndrome are more likely to be in severe hardship. We found they were less likely to have fresh fruit, vegetables, or a meal with meat, which is really important when you're a kid. And they were much less likely to be able to go on a school trip because their family couldn't afford it. We found a quarter of them didn't have friends over to play because their family couldn't afford, some biscuits or something for the kids to come over. And we found that they were twice less likely to have access to a computer to do their homework. So we know how important that stuff is, and we know that families are going without. We looked at young people and we found similar things. They were more likely to be in hardship. They were more likely to be in income poverty, which means that after they've paid for their housing, they don't have much money. They're more likely to live with their parent, and those parents are often quite old and getting older. And they really struggled to be able to pay an unexpected bill, and many of them were cutting back on fresh fruit and vegetables because of the cost. So that's pretty serious, especially how we're living now. We know everybody's really struggling because of cost of living, but for intellectually disabled people and people with Down syndrome, this is evidence that they're struggling more. So then we looked at older people, and we found that people in the Middle Ages were 9 times more likely to live with a parent. And for those people, their parents are often really old, and they themselves often need help. They're almost 3 times more likely to live alone, and they're 5 times more likely to live in social housing. Nearly half of them wouldn't be able to pay a bill they didn't expect. So that's quite difficult. And half of them weren't having a holiday away from home at least once a week. And we found similarly, more than 1 in 10 cut back on fresh fruit and vegetables because they couldn't afford it. So that was just some of the findings from our 2 reports. And I think if we talk about, improving the supports that people get, this is incredibly strong evidence that people with Down syndrome aren't getting supported. And so we're hoping that it will be persuasive to government, but I don't know. But that's what we've done, and I hope that was interesting.
Yeah, it absolutely was interesting, Shara. Thank you so much for all that information, and for Bridget as well, and for Andrew. We now move on to the next panel where we're going to explore the right to equity and accessibility. So I'd like to ask the first speaker, my son, Vincenzo, to speak.
Strive and Step Up believe that all people with Down syndrome should have equal rights in everyday life. We need to decide what support we need to have an ordinary life like everyone else, but a good life is the goal.
Thank you, Vinny. And I now invite another Strive member, Mike Shent, to speak.
I believe that all people with Down syndrome should have better access to all things in all areas of life.
Thank you, Mohit. I now have the pleasure to introduce Jade Farrar, Chair of National Enabling Good Lives, and Talia Thomas from National Enabling Good Lives.
Kia ora koutou. It's great to be with you for World Down Syndrome Day. Today we celebrate the lives and valuable contributions of people with Down syndrome. Alongside, we must also acknowledge the significant concerns within our disability community regarding the recent changes to funding. These changes have caused considerable distress and add to existing pressures. In this context, the Enabling Good Lives approach offers a clear and positive direction forward. EGL is a movement driven by disabled people and their whānau, advocating for a more inclusive Aotearoa with a support system that truly meets their needs by providing genuine choice and control. At its heart, EGL is guided by the principle of nothing about us without us. This means that decisions about a disabled person's life should be made by them, not for them. It's about building a system that focuses on individual strengths and aspirations rather than impairments. Crucially, EGL provides a framework to address the significant unmet needs in our community. The 2023 Household Disability Survey revealed that a substantial 62% of disabled people, or over 500,000 individuals, reported lacking necessary support, accommodations, medical care, or equipment. This clearly indicates a major gap in the current system. EGL tackles these issues by emphasizing flexible, portable funding, access to independent allies, and strengthening of community connections. These elements aim to provide the right support at the right time, tailored to individual needs. The Abuse and Care Report highlighted EGL as a desirable model for the future, recognizing its potential to create a more responsive and empowering system of support. On this World Down Syndrome Day, let us all embrace Enabling Good Lives as a clear pathway to positive change. It is a framework developed by and for the community, with the fundamental goal of ensuring disabled people, including those with Down syndrome, can live full and meaningful lives with the support and respect they deserve. Before I hand over to Tanya, I encourage you to learn more about the principles of EGL. Connect with disability advocacy groups actively working towards EGL implementation. Contact your local MP to advocate for a disability support system aligned with EGL principles. Let's work together to move beyond the current challenges and build a future where unmet needs of disabled people are effectively addressed through the empowering and community-led framework of Enabling Good Lives. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou, and tēnā koe Vinnie mō tō karakia. Thank you for your karakia. I think we're going to be a little bit short on time, so the one thing I'd like to stress in support of what Jade has talked about in terms of enabling good lives is the importance of people with Down syndrome self-advocating and having the confidence and the support to actively participate in anything to do with their lives. So for me, whatever we can do to support that means that if you have an active role in what's happening in your life, you're going to have more effective outcomes. You're going to have greater satisfaction. If you have a say in what you're doing, people will realize that it's unique to you and one size does not fit all. And I suppose the last thing is really about capability building, which is all about building skills. And those skills are built across lifetimes. They're long-term. They're not just about having capability or skills for now, it's for your future as well, so that you will get greater independence as you travel along in life. So my key message is, if you want help to learn how to be more effective in speaking up and being stronger in speaking up and gaining more confidence, talk to People First. They have some great courses. IHC also has some good courses if you're interested. So happy Down Syndrome Day, and thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a wonderful, wonderful event. Thank you. Kia ora.
Thank you, said Tanya. I now invite Serena Canafor, Project Manager, Access Matters at Rose Trust, to continue the conversation.
Kia ora, Rochelle. Thank you so much. Kia ora koutou, Juliana Tokoingwa. Well, thank you so much for the privilege of being part of the Big Connect, celebrating World Down Syndrome Day. Today, we're asking governments to make support systems better for people with Down syndrome. But here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, my talk will talk about the need to first ask our government to stop breaking the promises the government made when they signed the United Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And I want to tell you a story of a young boy. I've been given consent to share this story. Luandri is this very happy 6-year-old boy with Down syndrome that you see on the screen. He loves life and has so much to give. But right now, Luandri is being told he has to leave New Zealand. His mom, his dad, and his little brother, they're all allowed to stay, but not him. Because immigration say that he's not good enough, that he's a burden. I ask you how this is happening in 2025 in a country that is developed like New Zealand. New Zealand agreed that people with disabilities have the right to move freely and belong when they signed the convention. But right now, they're failing Luandri, just like they have failed many others. For many years, I have fought for fairer laws and against a harmful rule that is called the acceptable standard of health. And I learned something very important through these years. Ableism. This big word, ableism, means that treating people with disability as less valuable. And that's what's keeping these unfair rules in place. If we want to change support systems, we need to fight ableism. And here, what I suggest we do. First, we need to change the story about disability, because a lot of people think disability is bad. We need to show them that it's not bad, it's just part of life. Some of us are born with it, some of us become disabled through life, like me. We need to stop the unfair labels and the low expectations, because we know that we can do much more than people think we can. They need to see our strengths, our value, our mana. We need to make disability rights real. The promises of the United Nations Convention must be actual laws in New Zealand. And we need to make sure that people with Down syndrome and other disabilities are heard. When we are in decision-making spaces, when we have a voice, real change happens. Right now, New Zealand is deciding what kind of country it wants to be. Will New Zealand keep unfair and old rules, or truly stand for fairness and inclusion? In other countries, we see people with Down syndrome as members of the parliament, as TV reporters, social media influencers, fashion models, getting married, achieving their dreams. And in New Zealand, today, we see a child like Luandri facing discrimination. Luandri's future should not be decided by discrimination. It's time for New Zealand to do the right thing. Let Luandri stay and thrive, and improve the support systems that will enable all people with Down syndrome in this country to achieve their potential.
Thank you to Juliana. I would now like to invite Lauren Savage, Senior Advisor to the Chief Executive Whakaha Ministry of Disabled People, to speak.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Andrew. for that introduction. And thank you everyone for inviting Whaikaha here to be part of the day of celebration and also to listen to what has been said. Thank you to my fellow panelists for everything that you're doing to support the rights of people with Down syndrome. As Andrew said, my name is Lauren Savage and I work at Whaikaha. Normally, Paula Tesarero, our Chief Executive, comes this evening, and she was very sad to be missing, as she often looks forward to the big connect every year. She's asked me to send on her best wishes for the celebration. However, tonight there is a birthday in her family that she could not miss. I thought it would be helpful if I gave you an update on what Whaikaha is doing to make New Zealand a more inclusive and a better place for everyone here on the screen and for your disabled peers. To do that, we need to work with lots of people and organisations, other government agencies such as Ministry of Education or Ministry of Health, local government, which is your local councils, businesses, community groups, and disabled persons organisations. Everyone needs to work together with disabled people to make things better. This year, we will refresh the New Zealand Disability Strategy, which is our plan to make change. We are confident that we can make improvements in the areas that we are focusing on and that this will make a real difference for disabled people. So the areas that we're mainly focusing on are housing. We know that that we need more houses that are accessible for disabled people so they have more choice about where they can live and who they can live with. Health. Disabled people have a lot to do with the health system, but as we've heard tonight, it doesn't always work well for them. Education. Everybody should be able to get a good education, the support they need, and enjoy their learning, along with feeling welcome at their school and feeling like they belong. Justice. To make sure that disabled people are treated fairly by the law. And the final one is employment, because we know that there are a lot of disabled people in New Zealand who want jobs. So we need to make sure that everyone who employs people knows the value that disabled people can bring to the places of work. There will be lots of people helping us to develop that plan, people who know a lot about the areas that I talked about before, as well as disabled people who will make sure that the ideas and the actions that we come up with will actually be good for disabled people. This connects to the report that the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities did on New Zealand to give us ways on how we can better serve disabled people. There'll be times throughout our planning for this report where we'll be wanting to talk to you, your friends, your family, and others in the community about the strategy, and we really look forward to doing that. Whaikaha's got lots of other different pieces of work that we've got on at the moment, but I'm a little bit nervous that I'll go over time, so I won't go into them detail tonight. But I do want to say that one of the important pieces of work that we've got is responding to the Royal Commission of Abuse and Care. It is important that we make sure disabled people continue to be included in the government's response to this work, because we know of many disabled people who are not looked after by people that they should have been able to trust. We know that there's a lot of work to do. We also know it's been a really tough year for the community. We look forward to working with disabled people, family and allies to make all services better for disabled people in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Kia ora koutou, thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Lauren, and to our panel members. We really appreciate all the insights you've shared. And we now move on to the next panel, which is going to be focusing on the wellbeing area. And I'd like to invite Rochelle Waters to speak.
Survivors depart believe that all people with Down syndrome have the right to access support to ensure their well-being. We should have choice and control over how we live, how we participate in community. Support services should support independent living.
Thank you, Rochelle. I would like to invite Jeffrey McLean a Step Up member to speak. I and Step Up believe that Article 30 is important for our well-being. We have the right to take part in sports and activities in our community and also in our lives, just like everybody else. We also need access support if we need it.
Thank you, Jeff. I would now like to introduce Paul Gibson, Civic Centre Disabled and a life member of the NZDSA.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thanks everybody in the Down Syndrome Association. Thanks, Zandra, and a special thanks to all the members of Strive and Step Up, and to Dean for sorting out the tech issues. Tēnā koutou. Can I start off reflecting back to wellbeing on the whare tapawhā model? Wellbeing is about physical, mental, spiritual, and whānau family wellbeing. All of that comes together to make a person well. Many have reflected on the rights within the convention that make wellbeing live. The right to live independently and being included in the community. The opposite of this right is having your choices denied, and where you live and what you do in the community, institutionalization, group homes, where your decisions are not your own. And it's the right for children, for all people with Down syndrome, to be welcomed, to feel welcomed into families, into our communities, into our nation. The right to home and family, the right to the highest attainable standard of health, and the right to health services. The right to make your own decisions with the support you might need. And reinforcing again what others have said, the Disability Support Services Review has submissions due Monday, and bearing in mind what's gone on in the last year, the steps backwards, I would encourage you all to put submissions in around the various rights. They are obligations which our government should be implementing. I'm the Chief Executive of Visable, an organisation set up to respond to and prevent the abuse of disabled adults. The right to be free from violence, abuse, neglect, and even torture, which occurs in New Zealand, is the most fundamental of rights, and it gives a base level of well-being that is absolutely essential. If you're not free from abuse, nothing is well. To be safe is the absolute fundamental right in terms of well-being. If there is an adult at risk who can't recognise abuse or get themselves out of an abusive situation, we need to make sure there is someone in the system that can safeguard them, and that's part of the work at Visable. We work alongside people and try and give them the opportunity to create the space for them to make their own decisions through supported decision making, through advocacy, independent of wherever the abuse is coming from. A lot of the work we do is about physical abuse, about sexual abuse, and so much of it is about neglect as well. Things like nutritional needs, fundamental to many people in our society. And it's particularly not recognised, the forms of abuse which disabled people face as abuse. Visable is taking referrals from a range of disability-related organisations, NASCs, families, and disabled people themselves on abuse. And we try and work with them if they are an adult at risk, or we work with them to go through a mainstream response, a twin-track response, if they're able to do that, to get themselves out of an abusive situation and to help recover from that abuse. We work alongside individuals, always respecting their will and preferences. We also work with organisations to build their capability so that they themselves can recognise the systems or processes that they need to put in place to prevent abuse, and in the event that it does happen, to respond to it better, cut it off earlier. And also we need to build a safer system. We're going to be doing this through submitting to the Disability Support Services Review as well, and I hope you all can as well. We want a system where everybody's well-being is ensured. Our organisation, and I think the nation, should be built on the foundations of Te Tirihia o Waitangi, the Enabling Good Lives principles, the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, and the Abuse and Care Inquiry and its recommendations. The Abuse and Care Inquiry found, sadly, that abuse is far more pervasive, more horrific, more extreme, and more hidden, especially for disabled people in our society, than what most of us were ever aware of, what most disabled people and their families and those who support and provide services were ever aware of. The Abuse and Care Inquiry provides recommendations. It provides a vision for a different society of hope and inclusion, and many recommendations where everyone's well-being is ensured and abuse is prevented in the future. Along with the foundations of EGL, Enabling Good Lives, the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, Te Tirihia o Waitangi, also think about the Abuse and Care Inquiry as you put forward your submission to form the basis of a future going forward. Our organisation, Visable, also works on the basis of being disabled-led and being trauma-informed, so that the experiences of people is built in to what we're trying to do. We are part of the communities that we connect with. We understand what has happened. Trauma in our community is increasing as a result of the government decisions of the last year. We are finding direct examples of abuse and violence that have taken place because of funding cuts. We need to change this. Kia ora.
Thank you. I would like to introduce you to our next speaker, Laurie Hilston, CEO, Cares New Zealand.
Kia ora, thank you very much, Andrew, and I hope everyone is having a good evening. I'm finding all these presentations very interesting. Congratulations for World Down Syndrome Day, and thanks for asking me to the Big Connect to talk about everyone's work, but also our work at Cares New Zealand and the Cares Alliance to help with improving supports in the disability community for disabled people and families. The Down Syndrome Association is a founding member of the Cares Alliance, which we formed in 2004. I think there were about a dozen of us there to call for a care strategy and progress in this area of family and caregiving, crossing palliative healthcare, disability, the association on the Alliance Executive. The first strategy and action plan were launched way back in 2008, and there have been 3 5-year action plans since. Action is an optimistic word maybe for what's been achieved in that time, but we've kept plugging away. Cabinet with the current government is going to be deciding soon about the future of the care strategy, with hopefully a new rolling action plan that will start from late next year. More than 1 million New Zealanders provide support for family and whānau who have health and disability needs. And we can all expect to provide this support in our lives at least once, or we might need support ourselves. So policies like community-based care and aging in place couldn't work without this natural role by families. It's just that, despite that big number, it's very invisible and taken for granted. More than 45% of people in caring roles in New Zealand have a disability or health condition themselves, and the same number support at least 2 family members. So we know very little about disabled people who care for other family whānau members, and we need to understand more about them and support them more. Disabled people and families are obviously, as many of us have mentioned, experiencing a lot of uncertainty currently. Our role in the Alliance is to ensure visibility and support for families across government and in society, and to uphold where we can people's rights. Family whānau really need this focus too, because they are over-relied on with very low well-being, and that's escalating in our aging population. They can have their own well-being impacts, which come through very strongly in our research, and some of you have mentioned similar things in your presentations. And that can undermine overall family sustainability. The CARES Alliance, with involvement from leaders like Xandra, is working to seek fairness, accountability, and support for disabled people and their families. Our priorities are recognition and valuing of family whānau. We're hoping for a home and government for those in family caring roles with a ministerial focus, which other countries have, but we don't have here. And mental, physical, and financial well-being supports to sustain people in caring roles. 2/3 of carers are women, and one of the things we're talking about with government is for those who are 24/7 supporters to perhaps get the government to contribute the annual KiwiSaver contribution. It's a small way to recognize the work and support of 24/7 family cares. So we don't have time to go into all the issues, but Xandra asked if maybe there were some things we could suggest for people to do to support our work at the moment. One is to find time to have a say in the DSS consultation that Lauren mentioned. It closes on Monday. Even if you do a simple email submission, just saying this is what I think and what I think, what I would like to happen, that might be to support a return to more choice and flexibility for disabled people, and also support for family carers to be included in assessment processes so they can be sustained to keep doing what they do. Another easy step to support the Alliance's work for families is to go to the website wecare.nz and click through to our petition, which is still open, calling for the supports that I've referred to for family whānau. It only takes a few seconds to sign, and every signature makes a difference. We're planning to take it over at Parliament later in the year. So thanks for listening, and well done to everyone for celebrating World Down Syndrome Day and sharing all those interesting perspectives tonight. Thank you.
Kia ora, and thank you to the panel who explored well-being. We now move on to rights in education, and I would like to introduce our speaker, Abigail Knight, a member of Strive. Over to you, Abigail.
Strive and Step Up believe that all students with Down syndrome have the right to education. We know that we have individual learning needs, and we need access and support to participate in the curriculum. We want to be included, and we want to learn just like everyone else.
Thank you, Abigail. I would now like to welcome Chris Grant, Inclusive Education Lead, IHC, to speak.
Kia ora, everyone, and thank you, Andrew, for that introduction. It's great to be here again. It's always a blast to be with NZDSA at their events, and I've really got a lot out of hearing the other speakers tonight. I'm here to talk about education, and I've been talking about it for about the last 20 years or so, but there are some new things to talk to you about. When we think about the right to the right support to access education, you know, those conversations with government can become pretty interesting, because government says, well, you know, do you really need that much support? Oh, that support is really expensive. What about the other things that are in the system that need money? And actually, oh, this is all just a bit hard. So for about the last 30 years, the Ministry of Education, despite having really good intent to get this right, have not done the right thing by disabled students and neurodiverse students. Even though we've got a great piece of law that says that all disabled students have the right to attend their local school and have a great education, that doesn't happen. And some would say, and people, some of these lovely faces on the screen would say, absolutely, in 2025, not only are we not getting it right, things have gone backwards. So one of the things that IHC has done over the last 17 years is we've started to have interesting conversations with the ministry about the right to education. Now, the wonderful families that started IHC all those many years ago, about 70 years ago now or more, knew that the right to education was critical to, so important to their sons and daughters having a great life. Because if you don't have the right to education, that foundation right, you don't access other rights like the right to employment, the right to a good standard of living, the right to health, all of the things that Shara talked about, with the IHC research. So education's always been a big deal for IHC, and I know it's been a big deal for the New Zealand Down Syndrome Association and lots of other groups in the sector. So IHC had the courage to take legal action. And it's a big thing to say, we're going to sue you, government. We're going to sue the Crown. We're going to sue the Ministry of Education. We're taking you to court. And that's what we've been doing, not consistently for the last 17 years, but we've been in a process around that legal action. And the great thing about what we call strategic litigation and is famous around the world, it enables us, a little non-government organisation in civil society, to have a conversation with government about human rights and the human rights to education. So it creates a different way of thinking and talking about education and the rights of disabled students to be there, to belong, to learn, to achieve, to participate, and at the end of that time, to be sitting in a place so that you can get a job, volunteer, contribute to society, have a great life. So this is a serious business for IHC and so many other organisations that have been great allies to IHC, great friends to IHC in this long journey. At the moment, our journey is about, we're stopped at a bus stop where we're having these what's called without prejudice discussions with the Ministry of Education. We can't talk about the detail. It's all secret squirrel kind of talking. But what we're talking about is not only the right support for individual people at school. We're also talking about how the system itself, the education system itself, can better respond to disabled students. Because we think it's not just about the amount of support that you get. You've got to be in a friendly place where people know you, know how you learn, can put things in place to help you learn and welcome you and ensure that you have a great time in school and you have a great time when you leave school as well. You're set up for life. So they're really important conversations that we're having. I can't talk to the detail of it, but I mean, I think even though there's a lot of doom and gloom around about, and rightly so, about what's happening in the disability support systems, I think in education, there are some bright sparks. We've got some good recognition, the most recognition that we've ever had about the failures of our education system, not just for disabled students, but for all students. We've finally realised that, too many young people at school leave school without qualifications. They don't go to school. And when they're there, they're not having a great time. And what we know about disabled students is they're having Yeah, they're not having a great time either. And we've got government reports from the Ministry of Education and the Education Review Office themselves, and reports from NGOs like IHC saying exactly the same thing. So there's never been more agreement about the problems. And there's a high level of agreement too about the need to change, and the need to change quickly, and the need to embed important human rights principles within the way forward. So the biggest thing for me, though, and the biggest challenge, and I think, Julia, you referred to it, is thinking about the way, when we think about the way the education system and other big systems like health see disabled students. I can see that the devaluing of a disabled learner is peppered right through all of the policy settings. The policy settings tend to categorise disabled students, to the settings kind of end up with disabled students experiencing disadvantage and discrimination. They tend to think of disabled students in a deficit, negative way. I think most of us, many of us, and even those in the ministry are really challenging themselves to think, what can we do differently to ensure that we're not perpetuating ableist and unhelpful and policies and disadvantage to our students. So what I'd love you to do, the Minister for Education, Erica Stanford, has recognised that the whole system is the problem. So what I'd love you to do is write to the Minister and say, congratulations, you've got it right. In order for disabled students to have a fair go at school and to get what they need big changes to the education system. You've started on that journey, Minister, and we want you to continue with it. So congratulations. Come and talk to us. We'll help you do that.
Thank you, Suaz. And to continue the discussion, I invite Dr. Marie Kirk, Director of Support Teaching Practice TS and Learning Disability New Zealand.
Kia ora, everybody. Thank you, NZDSA, for organising the Big Connect. I'd just like to recognise the self-advocates and young people with Down syndrome here tonight and all their families, and all of you for being with us tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge the EGL principles, the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability and the treaty as the key frameworks that guide our discussion and frameworks for education and all the decisions we make for support systems for children and young people with Down syndrome in our lives. If we look at the role of education in supporting, strengthening support systems, education is a fundamental right for all individuals, especially important for young people with Down syndrome. However, it's truly important to improve the support system and having a government that is truly committed to this for all. We need universal access to inclusive education, and every student with Down syndrome should have access to learning environments within their local schools where they belong, participate and succeed. The government must prioritise school-wide inclusive practice, not just individual accommodations on a one-by-one basis. Teacher capability, professional learning and development approaches for inclusion need to be a priority of government investment, not an ad hoc approach. It's essential to build teacher capability and have that as a government priority, not a whānau priority. Educators want to take on board supporting diverse learners, but the lack of training, and especially in Down syndrome specific teaching strategies, is constantly falling back on parents. Transition pathways for life success is another key area that can support growth and development for children and young people, starting from early intervention right through the school years. From early childhood to adulthood, students with Down syndrome require structured transition planning within the school and across the school, right through to after-school practice. Government-funded transition programs require an emphasis on independence, capability, and employment pathways that are measured and accountable. Inclusion beyond the classroom needs to be focused on connection between education, health, and employment, and these must be strengthened. Funding for inclusive literacy and lifelong learning ensures ongoing support beyond school. We need to look at that biggest picture, just as Bridget was saying and Trish was saying, and that research evidence base. The second question looked at where the gaps are and what needs to change. Despite progress, critical gaps remain in our support systems. We have inconsistent implementation of inclusive education. Schools vary in their ability to implement inclusive practice, and it creates inequity across the quality of our education for young children and young people with Down syndrome. There's significant and remarkable variation in educational experience and the opportunity for a good life for young people across New Zealand. The major concern for a small country, we have the third highest number of children and young people with disability in the OECD, and we've had this data since the 1990s. The government must ensure accountability for schools to uphold their inclusive education policies and funding commitments. We have an under-resourced system, and schools remain concerned about that, but we have no action in place to address this. And this is not year by year, it's decade by decade. Speech language therapy, occupational therapy, and assistive technology funding remain inadequate. Policy changes need to guarantee access to essential support without long wait lists or funding cuts. These services are essential for life opportunities for children and young people with Down syndrome. The lack of transition support beyond school that has been started right from early childhood leaves many children unprepared for employment, higher education, or independent living. Families planning, or as Bridget said, having a vision is essential for post-school success. We call on the government to develop structured post-school transition frameworks that are funded and accessible for all students with Down syndrome. Strengthening the parent and whānau voice is needed. Families play a critical role in advocacy, yet systemic barriers make it difficult for them to access consistent and timely support. The government must engage whānau and disability organisations in decision-making to co-design effective policies based on child indicators of health, child indicators of wellbeing, and disability within the child age range. The call to action from NZDSA calls the government to look at what they must do. Invest in inclusive education with accountable measures, invest in teacher training and teachers building capability. Invest in parents building capability from early childhood and look at structured planning. Mandatory professional learning and development for families and educators and health professionals equips schools and professionals and families with strategies to support learners with Down syndrome and families of children with Down syndrome to access all opportunities for children to thrive. Expand funding for essential learning supports, guaranteed access to therapy, assistive technology and communication tools throughout school years. strengthen transition pathways, ensure accountability, partner with disabled people, families, and advocacy groups, and collect robust, meaningful disability data for children aged from birth to 25 years across all environments. Thank you, NZDSA, for the opportunity to address these issues. Kia ora.
Kia ora, and thank you, Marie. We now move on to the topic of employment, and I would like to invite Peter, a member of Strive, to speak.
Thank you, Sandra, for the introduction. Strive and Step Up believe that Article 27 of the UNCRPD means real work, real pay. People with Down syndrome have a right to work equal with others. It also means having support if we need it. We also need laws to protect us from discrimination in the workplace. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And I would now like to introduce Jennifer Dalbell, Managing Director of Downlights, to speak.
Thank you. It's really lovely to be here today, and I'm a passionate advocate for inclusive employment, and I'm honored to be a part of this discussion today. And the theme that's been raised by Zandra this year, it's very relevant for the work we do at Downlights, where meaningful employment opportunities, they're not just a goal, it's a fundamental right. That's how we perceive it. We've seen firsthand how access to employment transforms lives, fosters independence, confidence, as well as a sense of belonging. However, systematic barriers from funding gaps to limited workplace accessibility and employer support continue to hinder individuals with Down syndrome and learning disabilities from securing long-term jobs and fulfilling jobs. The Enabling Good Lives principles emphasizes self-determination, choice, and inclusion, yet many young adults still face a lack of tailored employment pathways post-education. The United Nations Conventions on the Rights for Disabled Persons, it's clear, equal access to employment is a human right. It's not an option. But to make this a reality, government needs to invest in sustainable, structured support systems. And I've outlined a few through my experience at Downlights. We need employment initiatives that provide real, clear career pathways, not just token jobs. Financial and training support for businesses that employ people with disabilities. Inclusive education to work transitions that ensure young adults are equipped with skills and confidence to succeed. Downlights supports the Pegasus unit, and they've told us we're the only employer that has supported them over the last 2 years. How are people going to gain workplace skills if we don't have more support for these types of organizations? We need stronger workplace accommodations so employees of all abilities can thrive and build capability skills. Businesses like Downlights show that inclusive employment is not just possible, it's actually powerful. And we need policies to incentivize and support businesses to hire inclusively alongside an education system that prepares young adults with disabilities for real workplace participation. So I'm strongly challenging the government to relook at minimum wage exemption. It's a complete violation of the United Nations rights, which the New Zealand government agreed to honour. Juliana, you called it out. It's a complete break of a promise. We need to join together. I look at how many disability organizations there are, and this might be a challenge, but I believe as one voice together on this matter about our breach of agreement with the United Nations would create more awareness. So let's just do it. Let's get a petition going. Let's march on Parliament. Let's just stop talking and do it. I'm really passionate about helping us move forward. This has to be the year. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Now please to introduce to Grant Clearland, Managing Director of Creative Solutions.
Tēnā koutou katoa, everybody. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to celebrate today with you. It's been a fantastic evening. I'm here to talk about what we need to do to improve education and employment outcomes for disabled people, and I agree with what Trish was saying and others have said, that there's a real link towards education and employment outcomes, and education's role with helping people to prepare for employment. I think the other thing that I'd like to say is, like everyone said, it's a right. It should be a right. We should have a right to education and employment. I'm coming to you from Christchurch. I grew up in Taranaki and was born with my disability, and so, like many disabled people, have faced many barriers in the education and employment system, and have also faced many, and also, I guess, found that I had wonderful parents who played a really important role in terms of making sure that I had the right supports going forward. What are some of the really key things that the data is saying about education and employment outcome? Well, if we go to the 2023 census data, I mean, one of the really key things that comes out of that is that over half of disabled people do not have enough income to meet their basic needs, and 62% of disabled people have an unmet need, which is over 500,000 people. When we look at education, disabled people are twice as likely to have no formal qualifications. That's what the research has been, or the data's been telling us over the last decade. Many disabled people struggle to achieve NCEA even with the learning support. And those that with qualifications are often employed at the same rate as others without qualifications. So, as others have already said, education, there's a lot of work to still be done. In terms of employment, what we know is that disabled people are more likely than non-disabled people to be unemployed by a significant amount, and that has, in fact, decreased over the last decade. Disabled people are more likely to work part-time, mostly in manual, low-skilled and low-income jobs, and underrepresented in underrepresented in higher incomes as well. But one of the things that came in the 2023 census is that over 70% of people who are not working want a job. So how do we improve education and employment outcomes? Well, the first thing that we need to do is address the systemic barriers that are impacting both in education and employment for disabled people. The ableism in the system, the focus on deficit rather than people's strengths and potential. We need to get rid of the red tape for getting for support and funding. It's just way too hard for people to get that support. And we also we need to build the disability confidence of teaching and support staff, and also within workplaces. The research, I think, again, that Trish talked about, 49% of teachers said that they didn't know about universal design for learning, and a really significant portion of them also felt that they didn't have the confidence to work with students with complex needs. We need to look at how to make the system more accessible in terms of communication information. And also we need to make it safer for people to put their hand up when they need support. And we also need to create pathways for people. It seems crazy to me that a wonderful internship program like Project Search in Christchurch here could fall over because we can't find some money in the system to make it work. Ministry of Education need to lift their game in terms of education, in terms of reporting, education experiences, academic outcomes. We need to look at how we make, or they need to look at how to make qualifications more accessible for people. We need to be making sure that there is more of a focus on universal design for learning and teacher education at all levels and within workplaces as well, so that people are able to get accessible teaching and accessible assessment as well. We need more funding for assessment so that people can get the support that they need. Government employment policy we need a government employment policy, not a welfare policy for the employment of disabled people. So currently, Ministry of Social Development is responsible for the government policy on employment for disabled people, and it's more about getting people off benefits and doesn't address the issues of for example, the additional support that people with Down syndrome and other impairments may need in employment. We need, I think, more schools, more tertiary providers, and also industries having disability action plans that actually get them thinking about what support would make a real difference for people. We need more data, obviously, and greater visibility of disability. Good examples of supportive workplaces, role models, etc., and more employer education funding and support. But most of all, I think what we need is we need to make sure there's nothing about us without us. We actually need to make sure that government is not only developing employment policy with disabled people and whānau, but also listening to them in terms of what actually is really required. So, just like to say a really big thank you, and it's been great to be involved tonight.
The next section we are going to do is health, a very crucial topic, and I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Erin Smith, who is a founding member of Strive to Speak. So, Erin, over to you.
Strive and SEPA believe that people with Down syndrome have the right to good health and access to health services, including family planning. We believe that health professionals need more training on the health needs of people with Down syndrome.
Thank you, Erin. And I am pleased to introduce Dr. Rosemary Marks, developmental pediatrician.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Rosemary Marks tōku ingoa. I lead the working group for the Down syndrome clinical guidance, which is a refresh of a document that was on the Ministry of Health's website for a long time and has long needed revising. We're part of the Paediatric Society's Clinical Networks program, which is supported by the Ministry of Health. So first I want to talk about access. Access to healthcare is really important. Now, I'd remind you that most health issues are sorted out in the community by the people who have the health issues. So knowledge for self-care is really important. For whānau caring for children, there will be information on the Kids Health website that's being refreshed soon. For adults, there's the Healthify website. The next thing I want to address is primary care. I think everybody is aware that primary care in New Zealand is in crisis, and yet it is actually probably the most important part of the health system. We hear a lot about hospitals, but what would really make a difference is quality primary care. So we have too few primary health care professionals, and in my opinion, that is because primary care is not made attractive for young doctors. And we know there are cost barriers. So my view is, and I don't know whether the government will take any notice, that primary health care needs to be free, no cost at the point of access when you see a primary health care provider. The secondary tertiary care area is actually important, but their role for most situations is to support the primary care providers. And of course, they provide highly specialized care when it's needed, such as cardiac surgery. And I'm sure some of the people on this call will be here today because they had access to cardiac surgery when they were younger. And information is power. So information, we are preparing information for the health providers who provide health professionals who provide care for children. It's a work in progress. It's taken us much longer than we wanted it to, but it's really important that the information is consistent and accurate and relevant to New Zealand. We hope to have something on the Starship clinical guidelines website for health professionals before the middle of the year. For whānau and individuals, Healthify website has information about a wide range of conditions, and I put the link there, which I can share with Zandra, on Down syndrome. I haven't had a chance to go through this and check that it's all good information, but Healthify is a well-trusted website. The other question I have is information available for adults, and particularly adults with Down syndrome who want to access information about their healthcare? And is that information accurate? Is it available online? And is it in an appropriate format? If you want an easy read option, can you find it? I just reflect on a couple of things that have been said earlier. If you are going to lead your best life, you need to be healthy. You need to have optimal health to function at your best. And it's very hard to advocate for yourself if you're feeling unwell. If you're feeling lousy, it's not easy to stand up for yourself. So I think that's a really important thing for people to remember. And we heard from Jade that more than 60% of people with a disability in New Zealand lack basic support, including medical care. And I think that's really serious. So we all want more funding for our little bits, but I think we can make the case that improving healthcare for people with disability and providing better information will, in the long term, save money. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary, and all the incredible speakers for the wealth of knowledge you have shared.
Kia ora, and thank you so much to all our speakers. How incredible, so much information. I wish we had more time to explore more things. What I'd like to do now is wrap up with one video that we're just going to watch. So you may all have seen it. The NZDSA was involved in the international campaign. And so, Dean, would you please show the video?
I want to be when the decisions are made.
What should Sophia wear for your brother's wedding?
I think this dress could be really nice.
Or maybe this one a little less formal.
It pairs well with her beautiful smile. I want to be when this decision is made. Where this decision is made. I want to have a say in the dress that I wear. Don't you think that it's fair? Let me have a look at these clothes. You want the truth? I don't like any of those.
The objective of this meeting is to approve this new proposal for an elegant and functional train station.
I want to be where this decision is made. Where this decision is made. If I'm here, I can help you recall that what's right for some isn't always right for all.
Here's the new place for all supplies. You might not realize that for me it's too high.
When you do this, you got to dash.
Our info points now have touch screens.
It's great for those who are able to see.
During my term, we'll write new laws.
Will impact us all.
But give us a seat too.
We want to be where the decisions are made. Where the decisions are made. It's time for us to be rebel and clean. Where the decisions are made.
This is what I'll wear.
I hope you enjoyed that great video. I have enjoyed this evening, and I am sure you will join me in thanking the incredible speakers this evening.
Thank you for attending this evening and showing us to celebrate World Down Syndrome Day.
Thank you, everybody, for contributing. And now I'd like to hand over to Peter Rees to do the final karakia.
Kia ora te moreno, kia whakapapa puna mo te moana. Hei, hua rahi mau tato e te rangi nei. Harawa atu, harawa mai tato ai tato katoa. Hua e tai ke e. Thank you.